Well, why is it that walking in nature particularly is so good for you? According to the World Health Organization data, insufficient physical activity is the fourth most frequent cause of death worldwide. 3.2 million deaths each year are attributed to it. And while many people know that they should exercise more, often we don't feel that it is worth doing at the particular time. Maybe it all feels a bit too hard. The great news is, though, that a new body of research is suggesting that even relatively small amounts of walking can significantly shift the dial on your mental health as well as your physical health. Adjunct Fellow at Macquarie University and founder of PhysioScience is Louise-Bouvier. She's here to tell us all about it. Very good afternoon to you.
Hello.
You're also the national patron of Coastrek.
I am.
What is that?
I am. Coastrek is an amazing thing. It was started nearly 20 years ago by a woman called Di Westaway, and she started off with a walk that went along the coastline of Sydney. The original walk was you could either do the 50-kilometre walk, which went from Palm Beach to Balmoral, or you could do the 100-kilometre, which was in one day from Palm Beach all the way to Coogee.
So we're talking about big walks here.
Big walks.
Okay.
And so you get groups of 4 people. It doesn't have to be women, but often it was women. And altogether they've raised over $50 million for Fred Hollows, Beyond Blue, and now the Heart Foundation. So it's a pretty amazing thing. And there's Coastrek in Sydney, there's one in the Sunshine Coast, there's one on the Fleurieu Peninsula, one in Mornington Peninsula, and now also one in the Margaret River. So you can do eco-travel.
Okay, so I want to talk about the benefits of it. If you would like to call and have a chat about all of this, because I know sometimes it can be intimidating. You know, distances like that can be pretty intimidating. Maybe you don't have the time or the inclination. The number's 1300 222 702. You can also text us on 0467 922 702. So why is walking actually good for us?
So what I love about walking, I read a study the other day that said that walking is probably the single most accessible public health initiative that is out there, and yet we're not recognising that something so simple can be so powerful because it has physical, psychological and social benefits, and that's why it's so good for us.
We often talk about the 10,000 steps, people with the smartwatches or whatever other device. Why 10,000?
So this was very cute. In coming up to the Tokyo Olympics in the 60s, manufacturer had invented the first pedometer, and apparently when they were working out what the marketing would be for it, they decided that maybe 10,000 was a really good number to aim for. And so it's sort of just, it was one of those amazing marketing things that just absolutely stuck.
So it's not a scientific thing?
It was no scientific research. It was a Japanese marketer. And so if you think about that, that's nearly 50 years later. You know, everybody was hooking onto these 10,000 steps. And whilst there's a lot of research that 10,000 steps is great, the latest research is saying actually by 4,000 steps. So there's a big study coming out of Johns Hopkins and also out of a university out of Poland. They looked at 226,000 pieces of retrospective data. And what they found is that at 4,000 steps a day, it has significant impact on decreasing your risk of premature death. And after for every 1,000 steps after 4,000, it decreases your risk by another 15%.
So what are we talking about in time? Like how long is 4,000 steps roughly compared to 10,000?
Have you ever had a pedometer?
No, I never do. I don't like having a device and I don't like measuring fitness. I just like doing it.
Totally. And I think that's one of the big things is that people in public health, you know, we kind of go, oh, you know, people need to do 150 minutes of exercise and 10,000 steps and think that's motivating. Whereas for the vast majority of people, that is the biggest turn-off. And I think for me as a physiotherapist and not an exercisey sort of person, like I've always thought the lower we put the bar, the more likely people are to get involved.
Well, hang on, you just said you're a physiotherapist but not an exercisey sort of person. What do you mean?
Well, I'm not sort of like a kind of fitnessy person. I was never sporty. I was never so I kind of come of it from a, wow, how do I get just normal people to do stuff, not people who are born naturally gifted at sport. You know, I had asthma as a kid. I was kind of that sort of kid. I like ballet and art and things like that. So I guess, for me, it's all about how can I get the vast majority, because only 11% of people will go to a gym. If you're a gym person, you would say, well, everybody loves going to the gym. But
Yeah.
the vast majority of people don't want to go to the gym. We know that nearly 60% of people don't meet recommended exercise guidelines, and that number increases exponentially in certain target groups. So, there's a lot to be said. I remember once we did some work with Adam Ferrier from the Gruen, when he was on Gruen transfer, and he was saying in advertising, and I think it should be the same in public health, if you lower the time and lower the effort, then you are much more likely to get somebody to partake in an activity. And I think the beautiful thing about this new data saying 4,000 steps, which is, if you've ever worn a pedometer, 10,000 steps is quite a lot. You have to have, either you're a butcher or a teacher or a retail person and you commute to go to work. So
I thought you were going to say candlestick maker.
No. But if you can get your steps up because you're on your feet all the time. But for a sedentary person who doesn't commute, and you need to have done an exercisey walk and also been on your feet quite a lot. Whereas 4,000 steps is very achievable.
We're talking about walking. Are you a walker? Do you have a particular route you take? Are you a newcomer to big walks? The phone line is 1300 222 702. We'd love to hear from you. The text line is 0467 922 702. Tony's texted in, Anne-Marie, and said, I'm a walker initially to keep my blood pressure and weight under control. I walk at least 10 kilometres a day.
Wow.
And I mix it up with running and tennis each week. My blood pressure is normal. And my weight is now in the healthy range. I play the quiz with Indira while I go from my nightly walks to, I guess, podcasts are sort of a thing now that help us if we're trying to get into a walking routine.
Yes.
I know I love now. I used to do big walks, like big holiday treks. But I'm finding as I get a little bit older, I'm sort of liking the shorter walks as well. And, pop in a podcast, do a couple of laps of a park or...
And you feel great.
A coastal walk. It's amazing. You just come away feeling totally enlivened without too much exertion.
That's right. And I think that's the other, really big thing. Whilst there are huge physiological benefits from walking, we know it decreases your, heart rate, decreases your blood pressure, changes your lipids, all those sorts of things. It's the psychological impact of walking, particularly in nature, that is just blowing me away with the research. There was a fantastic study that I read where they looked at the effect of walking in nature versus walking in an urban environment on your amygdala. And your amygdala is the part of your brain that it's your flight-fright part. And it's the most beautifully designed study because they did a questionnaire, 2 questionnaires, then a functional MRI, so they could actually see the brain activity. Then they sent you either off for an hour in nature or an hour in the streets, and then they repeated the whole thing. But the stress questionnaires, the first one was what's called the Fearful Faces questionnaire. So that's where they show you like a scream, like screaming faces, people get really... And the second one is called the Montreal Maths Stress Test. And what it is, they are maths questions that not only do they give you the incorrect answer once you've answered it, but they also tell you that whatever answer you've given is below average.
Yeah. Okay.
So people are constantly going, oh, I didn't get it right and I'm not very good. And so, and what they found is that the group that walked in nature compared to the urban environment, their amygdala activity decreased by 25%.
Wow.
So you can actually totally change your stress responses just by going for a walk with some trees.
I'm talking to Anna Louise-Bouvier, our resident physio who is non-exercisey, she tells me. Andy's on the line this afternoon. Where and how far are you? Oh, I think Andy's just disappeared.